point. Something that I always do, ask yourself, what would it take for you to change your mind about something you were very, very convicted in, something that you held your strongest belief system, whatever that is, whether it's religion, politics, whatever it is. And if think about that, what would it take for you to change your mind on that? And if you're trying to change someone's mind about something, are you behaving in a manner that you would respond to if somebody was doing it to you? In this episode, I actually asked my husband, Mark, to join me to revisit the purpose of the Humanity Unlocked podcast. The podcast was founded on the principle of checking judgment at the door to allow space for curiosity to develop. In this episode, we circle back to this principle, and I share what this has looked like for me in practice in my own life and what it has looked like for me as the host of this podcast. I recently heard a quote that said the difference between judgment and empathy is knowing the full story. And I just thought, gosh, I could not have said it better myself. I mean, that's what we're here to do. And with that in mind, I hope you guys enjoy the episode. What are your thoughts about the premise of the show? What is your impression of the show's purpose?
So my personality is that I like to hear diverse thought, diverse opinion. I like to hear opinions that I've never considered before, or experiences that I maybe don't necessarily relate to. It opens my eyes to like, look, that's not the way I grew up. I didn't have to go through those trials and tribulations. I mean, in my mind, thank goodness. But this is who they are. This is the journey that they took, and this is how they got to where they're at today. Mm-hmm. And so for me, what I like and what I take out of it is just different perspectives. Because look, we all live different lives, and I hate the expression we all like we have our truths or whatever. Like to me, truth is truth. Like there's no possessive in front of it. It's you know what I mean? It's either the truth or it's not the truth. It's not my truth.
Well, no, that we're gonna have to do just a separate episode on that, all because I disagree with that. But that's okay.
But like that's just how I define it. It is or it is not. It is not. You can't own it. Mm-hmm. But what it is that you have these different experiences that formulate the people who they are today. And one of the interesting things about the podcast is that it exposes you to different people and different, people culminate into who they are through their past experiences, right? That's the bottom line.
It explains a lot. When you hear somebody's background, it really informs like why they are the way they are. And, I've talked about this. In fact, I was asked to do a TED Talk, if you remember. This is before the podcast even launched. And I just said, at first I said yes, and then it got rescheduled, and I was actually thankful because it got rescheduled during our Austin trip, so I got out of it. But I told the gal who was putting it on, I said, well, just circle back to me if you ever do another one. But the whole premise when I did initially accept was going to be about the fact that the most interesting people in the world, if you were to stop and think about, okay, who are the most interesting, most fascinating people in the world? They're usually people who have gone through a lot of adversity, who have overcome a lot. And it's very interesting that we are so focused on running from adversity and shielding our children from adversity, and we're scared of it when really it's the one thing that helps us grow.
It's true.
And learn and develop into interesting people. And I mean, I challenge the listeners to think about the most interesting person, whether it's a public figure, a family member, a podcaster. In my case, it might be a podcaster that I listen to. An athlete, or a musician. Think about who the most interesting person you could think of is, and they probably have a background where they've had to overcome something challenging.
Here's, I think, the point, though, is that we all have these different journeys, and you arrive at different locations, but you have to understand that location is unique to them, mm-hmm. and your journey is different, and you have to be careful not to judge somebody for where they're at today.
Yeah. So I actually, I've been journaling, when I was asked to do the TED Talk, I'm going to refer back to this because this is when I was really developing a lot of these ideas around the podcast, and also just in general ideas I've had for the last few years. When I started doing the work, quote unquote, which we'll talk about that too. But I just pulled some stuff from my journal, stuff that I wrote, and I'm just going to read it to you guys. To your point that you just said, Mark. I wrote, my obstacle taught me how not to judge anyone by what they're going through on the outside, because I know that obstacle is part of their story. It's a chapter in their book. Sometimes there's multiple chapters. Sometimes these obstacles take up 5 or 6 chapters of a 10-chapter book. And when someone's on chapter 5, drowning in the struggle, fighting through the trenches, and I'm on chapter 10, having made my way out, I remind myself how it felt when someone couldn't understand what I was going through. It felt lonely, and the last thing I would wish on anyone is to feel judgment when they are in the trenches. And it is also, just to piggyback on that, very easy when you're in chapter 10 to talk to somebody in chapter 5 and try to tell them how to do it differently. When people are in it, it is very difficult to always make the right decisions 100% of the time. And it is through making mistakes that they are going to find their way and they are going to have the most growth. So I'm very careful with, first of all, judging somebody when they're in it. And secondly, trying to tell them how to do it any differently. Even with my own children, I have to, I'm very careful with that. Go ahead.
What you're saying reminds me of something when I was in college still, actually. And I was much more of a judgmental person.
Were you?
Yeah. Okay. So I could picture this as clear as yesterday, which is rare. I don't have that great a memory, but I'm envisioning this right now. And I remember this. I was sitting out on a patio, restaurant-ish, something like that. And looking out and seeing this guy, very kind of emo guy walking down the street, tattoos, very visible tattoos, hair over his face, that kind of thing, and just, dressed in black, that whole look.
Yeah.
And I turned to the person in front of me and I said, like something to the effect of, what's that guy gonna do, in life? I looked at that guy okay, I can't imagine that guy working for your normal employer. And then, of course, I'm 21 years old or something like that. So, I judged that person without knowing his past, 1, and 2, without knowing who he is and what he wants in his future, because what I want in life is going to be very different than what somebody like that may want out of life.
That's the first thing I thought about.
And I just couldn't see don't you want stability? Don't you want a good paycheck?
Right.
And, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he has zero value in that.
It's exactly the first thing I thought about when you started talking. I feel like we all have a different frame of reference. And I think that's when people say our truth, I think that's what they're talking about. We're all coming from our own truth, our different frame of reference, where we grew up, how we grew up, what we learned, what we know, what we don't know. It's going to be different for everyone. So, he is a reflection of his upbringing, of his home life, of his personal life, or maybe he's just an artist and he likes tattoos and who knows? It doesn't really matter. Yeah. But that's the whole point of not judging. It really doesn't matter. Really, what this podcast is about, this episode is about, is sort of circling back to our purpose, because I'm going to have. I have a feeling that I'm going to have on guests that are not going to resonate with everybody. And it's important to circle back, because if you can remember my initial episode, my trailer, and in my initial reels I put out on Instagram, if you follow me on Instagram, I spoke about the fact that the aim isn't for us all to agree. The aim is for, even when you disagree, especially when you disagree, that you're able to see a person's humanity, regardless of whether or not you agree with something they say or do or don't do. If you think that I'm going to agree and co-sign on every decision or guest or lifestyle that comes into the studio, you're wrong. And it's not, but that has no bearing on how I will treat them as a person. Mm-hmm. Whether or not I feel like they are kind, whether or not I feel like they're respectful, whether or not I think they're a good guest. The purpose is not to agree. The purpose is to see the humanity, hence the name Humanity Unlocked. Mm-hmm. So I challenged myself to have these discussions. There's this you hear it a lot, and you and I have talked about this, and I think this is probably the conversation where I think you said, hey, why don't we do this in studio, this conversation? I asked you, do you ever hear people talk about like hanging out with like-minded people? Have you ever heard that phrase thrown around? And what did you say? Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly,
But do you remember how you felt about it?
Yeah, I that's boring.
Right.
That's probably what I said.
And I think that there's a time and a place. There are circles for that. There are, obviously, like I was talking today to my girlfriend about church, like-minded people, like you're around people who share your same beliefs.
Religion and politics, right?
Sure. But in terms of I've been to a couple like women events, and when I tell you that everybody, it was like a bunch of, and myself included, by the way, it was like a bunch of me's. Yeah. I was looking at a bunch of me's. We were all in, don't take this as a put down or an insult, because I'm talking about myself. So if I'm insulting you, I'm also insulting myself. But we were all a bunch of middle-aged white Christian women who were married with children. I didn't see a lot else.
All put together the same way.
We all dressed the same. And not to say, not too is judging a book by its cover, except for what and this is more than just one event. This has been a couple different times this has happened, which is why I'm bringing it up. The presentation and the talk and everything about it it's kind of a little bit like preaching to the choir, a little bit like, we all already agree on this. Mm-hmm. We all already know this. We're all already on board with this.
The subject matter was something that everybody had in common anyway.
What are we doing here? I guess community, yes. But I am so fond of having conversations and being in company where you're not going to be, we're not going to share everything in common. If I were to, let's take, for example, the Afghan refugee family. Some of our listeners will know, some won't. In September of 2021.
I have something to say about that.
Okay. In September of 2021, after the fall of Afghanistan happened in August, it's a long story. Maybe I would love to actually have on the wife, Rahila. If she, I haven't talked to her about it. Maybe I will. I just saw her. I should have brought it up. Anyways, as a guest. But the fall of Afghanistan happened in August. Long story short, but we basically took in this family as a refugee family. It's like we were their host family. We'd made a bunch of calls.
We just basically fostered them.
We fostered them, for a month, got them all set up and everything. I'm a Christian woman. Okay. It's not a secret. And they are very devout Muslims. And if I would have let my faith stand in the way of taking them in, I would have robbed myself of one of the most beautiful experiences I have ever had and maybe will ever have in my entire life. They are the kindest, most loving people that you could ever meet. I am forever thankful that we followed. I feel like God's plan for us was to actually, we were led to do this. And I'm thankful that we followed our hearts on that, because it was we were going into the unknown. But the point is that I didn't let something that was different from, everything was different about it. I mean, the language was different, although they spoke good English, but the religion was different, the country was different, the culture was different, the food was different. I mean, everything couldn't get more different. Mm-hmm. But in the heart, in our hearts, we're very similar, she and I. We learn a lot from each other. We continue to. I adore her. I adore the whole family, but obviously I'm closest to the mom. So it's just an example, and that's not to toot my own horn, but this is something that I've challenged myself to do. And so in challenging myself to do this over the last, I say 5 years, because it's when I really realized I have a lot of work to do. That's the whole reason for the podcast, because I thought, well, if I can do this, if I can start to see things from perspectives that are different from my own, then maybe other people that have challenges with that will start to do that as well. I want to talk about, so there's, coming from, because I'm Christian, there's, we are to guard our hearts. We are to, practice discernment. And there is, I want to talk about that a little bit. And there are obviously like viewpoints that, maybe are not considered acceptable within the faith. And I have my beliefs, and I'm very convicted in them. Just because, and I don't feel the need to like shout them from the rooftops or share them. That's not what this is about. I'm not telling anybody how to.
And that's not your style either.
No, it is definitely not. I live the way I live my life is my testament, and I am happy to share with anybody who wants to speak to me further on it. But just because I don't agree with somebody, it doesn't mean I'm not curious. And it sometimes, most of the time, if I don't agree with somebody, and it's not like I sit and think like I don't agree with you, because I'm not super opinionated. Like I love this line. It's that in my head, whenever there's something that it kind of doesn't sound good from the outside and maybe feel off on the inside, but I don't quite know. And it's the line, it's insufficient data for a meaningful response. If you remember that, so for me, I will hold my tongue because I don't know enough. And there's such power in the I don't know. And I love saying I don't know. Like, I don't know. Sometimes we really just don't know. So in those instances, I default to kindness, and I am loving and accepting, and I put judgment on the back burner, and I lean into curiosity. So usually if something doesn't hit exactly like where it would align with me, and sometimes it makes me more curious because I want to understand. But I trust myself to learn about something that I don't agree with. I mean, without being influenced, and I'm willing to put myself in another person's shoes, even if I don't agree with them or don't understand, because I am very secure in my own discernment skills. And I think that if you trust yourself and know you're not easily influenced and know you're not an impressionable person, and you are convicted in whatever it is you believe, you will have the confidence to, or we're going to take religion and politics because we know they're the most divisive right now, just as a example. If you are on the left or on the right, and if you are confident in your position, you will be okay sitting across and discussing with the opposite.
Let's take a Christian talking to an atheist. Both of them could be convicted in their own ways, but as long as kindness is, as long as the discussion is a matter of in good faith, so to speak, and you come from kindness, and you're not trying to, you could have discussions, you could have debates, and they could be friendly. And as long as it's not personally attacked, you're attacking somebody, it's okay to share these different opinions. And the truth is that as a Christian, it's even more important to be in that place where there's others, non-Christians.
I agree.
Right, and where you can, and then at that point, it's like, you could. There are different ways of taking on that scenario, but the most effective way is just to lead by example.
Right. Something that I always do: ask yourself, what would it take for you to change your mind about something you were very, very convicted in, something that you held your strongest belief system, whatever that is, whether it's religion, politics, whatever it is. And if think about that, what would it take for you to change your mind on that? And if you're trying to change someone's mind about something, are you behaving in a manner that you would respond to if somebody was doing it to you? So with that, I think, okay, like I know what my convictions are, and I am the way I see people trying to change minds out there. All that's going to do is I'm going to dig my heels in more.
Totally.
You know what I'm saying? Because they go on the defense.
Yeah.
So I feel like the way you carry yourself in your life, the way you, when I just mean your interactions, like, conversationally as well, you are going to make a lot more progress than you will telling somebody that they're a terrible person, whether or not we're talking about religion or politics
Correct.
or whatever.
And people need to be heard. That is probably the single biggest thing that's one of the biggest problems in the world right now, is that people are talking past each other and nobody's listening to each other. If you and I are on opposite sides of an issue, and I was patiently listening to you and you explained to me everything that you felt about an issue, I took that in, I listened to it, and I acknowledged it. And then I could turn around and say, and then do the opposite to you. Mm-hmm. We could have a mutual understanding.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, we could find a point of common ground. Mm-hmm. Because you cannot convince somebody to come over to your side on any issue unless there is some common ground somewhere that you could build upon.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just bashing at each other, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's reserving judgment and taking a look at the other person and really taking them like holistically. Mm-hmm. They're a person just like you are too, and they had whatever formed their beliefs. They've gone through a different life experience to get them to where they're at. And we just have to recognize that and be patient.
Yeah.
You're not going to convince somebody overnight to come your way. And it's more important that they feel heard than anything else.
And safe. Like, that's another thing too. Like, when the time does come, if they do start seeing things from your perspective, whatever it is, let's take it even to something like, say somebody's in a really bad marriage or in a bad relationship or whatever. Say it's your child. Say you have a 25-year-old daughter who's in a relationship with a 35-year-old man and he treats her horribly. And the more you like beat her over the head with how awful he treats her and she needs to leave and the more she's going to be stubborn and probably stay. So think about how you're going to go about that. You're going to show love and kindness and reminder that you're always there for her if and when she's ready to talk. And if anything should happen, you're a safe place for her to go to. And, it also makes me think about like my own mom when I was young. This is another, it's just an example of like how to make somebody feel safe coming to you. Like my mom always said that if I was in a position where I was out and my driver was intoxicated, or if I was out and I was intoxicated, that I could always call her no matter what time, day or night. And she would come and get me, and no questions asked. I mean, that was like drilled into my head. And that happened a lot. I mean, when you're a teenager, a lot of times the people that are responsible for driving, they drink. And I would never, first of all, I would never drink and drive. Secondly, I would never get in a car with somebody who's been drinking because of what I've learned just from my dad and being around the program and stuff. And so I called my mom several times, probably half a dozen times in my teenage years, to come get me in the middle of the night. Sometimes it was like all the way across town, like 30 minutes away. And because it was safe and it was like unconditional. You know what I'm saying? Like was I in a bad situation, or did I put myself in a bad situation, or did I use, was my judgment off to be in that situation in the first place? Maybe not. I don't know. But she never shamed me because of it. And I think that, again, like even using the daughter situation, like,
that's a really good example.
Yeah.
Actually.
So it's just, I don't know. But talking about, my own, tendencies and my own triggers, this, like, I mean, we talked a little bit about what it means to like do the work, and I talked about it on my Instagram today too. I always, like, I didn't know, like, what do you mean? Do what work? What do you mean? I don't understand. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what is this like very like elusive phrase? Nobody actually knows what it means, but I think it's different for every person. Like, what is it that what is stopping you from sort of like stepping into your, being the best you can be? I don't know. There's probably
the best version of yourself.
There's probably somebody that can explain it much better than me. But for me, I was very I would say, insecure, especially coming out of my illness and stuff. And I was never super judgmental because I knew what it felt like to be judged, and I knew like what it felt like to not feel understood. And so pretty quickly, it occurred to me like, wait a minute, like if I was doing that, like, wait a minute, this is what people are doing behind my back. So I don't want to be that kind of a person. So I would catch myself. And so when I really started working on it, I would do it like watching TV shows, like watching, reality shows, or listening to podcasts, or watching. I mean, I'm a reality show and documentary junkie. I'm not really big on fiction. I like to look at real world scenarios. I like to look at somebody's character on TV who's real, not a fictional character. And I like to see if I can see the good in everybody. It's like a challenge I do to myself without judging. And so I worked really hard to understand my own tendencies and my own triggers. And if I was being judgmental or even resentful about something, I'm not talking about like TV, but like in real life, I would stop and examine that. Like, wait a minute, why am I having this visceral reaction to this person? And I would suspend judgment because I realized that I didn't know. You don't know the full story. And just as when I felt judged, I hated that they didn't know my full story. Like I hate, this. I hated that nobody knew the full story, and they were judging me based on the little bit that they knew. So I learned to embrace, like, I don't know, because I didn't know. And none of us do. We hope that others will treat us with compassion when we're walking through things. Like, we hope we'll be afforded that grace and compassion, especially when we're walking through things that are like misunderstood. So I don't know, like, even if our choices are wrong because we're not quite strong enough yet to know how to make the right ones, which is a lot of times the case. We hope we're going to be afforded a little bit of grace and compassion in the interim as we sort of muddle through. So that's sort of that's what I've been working on for the last several years. That sort of brought me to this. Not that I think somebody coming on and explaining their story is going to change everybody's opinion of them, but I want people to know that somebody cares enough to listen, and that I guess I'm giving what I wanted. I guess I'm giving what
you're giving
I
the space
needed.
that people need.
I'm giving
to be understood.
Yeah, I feel like, a lot of times in life, I feel like when we go through something, you think, and then you get out of it, and you think back, like, what did I need most in that time? What would have helped me most? And for me, I just remember saying all the time, I just want people to understand. I wish people could understand. And so I feel like that is sort of where this all comes from. I mean, yes, it helps. I'm a really curious person, and that's all.
What was it back then that you wish that people understood?
I felt, okay, so this is something I haven't really talked about, not publicly anyway. So, when I was really sick, I would say late 2011 to 2014.
And what does really sick mean?
Meaning I wasn't medicated yet, or I wasn't on medication that worked. I wasn't able to stand or walk around or function very easily. Physically, I definitely had a lot of brain fog. I was tired all the time.
So basically, you were tired all the time. Your limbs were weak. You were in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
For to be mobile because your legs couldn't support you.
Right. So when I was going through that time, so if you saw me, if you were in my circle and you saw me, you would never have seen me like that, because I would have never allowed anybody to see me like that. I had too much pride. I cared too much about what other people thought about me. I didn't want people I was embarrassed. It's like I was embarrassed that I had this. I don't know why. This was so long ago. I was, in my late 20s, early 30s. I didn't want anybody to think I was attention seeking. Like I would have never allowed anybody to see me like that, which is why there are so few pictures of me in a wheelchair. If you did see me, it would have been because the medication I happened to have medication that worked that day, which was rare. I over-consumed it. I probably took double the dose, which I was notorious for telling people, oh yeah, I would tell people, I'm like, oh yeah, I am. They would be like, oh, well, you look great. I'm like, I am drugged through the roof right now. Like I would say that.
Yeah.
And I would pull myself together, put on my best outfit, hair, makeup, the whole thing. And I would, but I couldn't do that every day. So I would, first of all, I did not have the capacity to. There was a lot of sleep and rest that I would have to go through leading up to that. And then coming out of it too, I had a long recovery period. So I was judged based on when they saw me, when I looked normal, that people, I know people were saying she's saying that she's sick, but she looks fine. Well, yeah, I look fine because there's no way I'm going to let you see me. I was so like, I don't know what my hang up was, but I didn't want anybody to see me like that. It was so, it was so uncomfortable for me.
You just didn't identify as that person that was,
It was,
just bound, homebound. You identified as a person that you wanted them to see.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. It's just like, that wasn't you. You didn't want them to see the thing that wasn't you.
Yeah. Yeah. I was so uncomfortable with people seeing me like that. And also too, like, I didn't, one of the reasons why I didn't talk on the phone or communicate a lot was because I didn't always have the skills or the cognition. And, I didn't want people to hear me like that. I did not want to bring anything less than 100% to every single, and I'm still a little bit that way, to every single interaction. If I can't give you 100% of my attention, like if I can't bring it, then I won't show up at all. Like I won't answer the phone at all. I won't make the phone call at all. I won't show up. If I'm not coming to something, or if I'm not speaking to you, 99.9% of the time it is because I can't give you what my standard is to give in those scenarios. And that is a me problem. Like I have to learn how to be okay with not being perfect, with not looking, 100% or feeling 100% and being able to be in public like that. But that also creates another issue because then I feel like the couple of times I was more raw and real, I kind of felt like people were a little uncomfortable with it, or they didn't know how to react, or they didn't know how to, and I was always afraid like, oh my gosh, are they going to think I'm like faking it? Or are they going to think I'm trying to get attention? Which, gosh, I mean, that is the last. You're already worried about that from your doctors, thinking you might be a hypochondriac because the tests aren't exactly clear in the beginning. That the last thing you want is your friends thinking that, or, my family never thought that, but they knew better. But so I felt nobody was like really super overt about it, but I have intuition enough to, I could feel my way through those interactions. And so, or maybe it's all in my head. I don't know. But yeah, so I just felt, I didn't feel understood. There was, yeah, I guess that's all I'll say about that. So it's what I needed. And so it's like, I feel like that's why I'm providing it. And I have so much empathy for people that are like right in the middle of the trenches, because I know that's like the hardest place to be without having a person to like really hold that space. And like I had you and I had my mom, but I didn't let anybody else in because I didn't think anybody else could hold. I think it would be too heavy for them to hold. I mean, it was so much. I mean, I think you'd agree.
Yeah, it was a lot. And, considering how all your friends kind of talked to you, it was like they were offloading their stuff on you.
True. That's another aspect of it too. That
instead of the other way around, nobody held space for you.
Well, again, like I actually had one friend point out to me recently, like a year ago, like, Kim, you have to take accountability for this too. You don't exactly create space in our interactions for us to talk about you because you're always wanting to talk about everybody else. And she was right. Because this friend in particular is a really good friend. And so she would be the kind of friend that would listen and everything. But I have also had plenty of interactions where like I would listen for a long time, and then the minute I started talking, the person would pick up their phone, or they would start scanning the room to see if there was maybe somebody more interesting to talk to, or they would change the subject back to themselves. And that kind of sends a message to you that you're not A, interesting, or B, like, I don't know. I'm not sure, but
It's just that's people self-absorbed.
I think that I have had a couple really kind friends lately just talk to me about this. Like, another friend of mine said, Kim, I know what you're saying. Like, I get it. And she said, I even found myself doing that with you, like where bringing it back to me or whatever. She goes, but this is going to sound terrible, but take it as a compliment, because people are so in need of that. And it's so rare that somebody will sit and listen for I'll sit and listen for an hour, and it will not break my attention. Like, I will sit and be engaged and lock eyes, and I'm in it with you, and I'm holding that space. That is, and she said that's very rare. So I think we get excited when we get to spend. And so I did take that as a compliment, but at the same time, like, I don't even know what I would do with a friend like me in those cases. Like, I'm not saying trust me, when I say I'm not the most amazing friend, I am definitely not. Like, in person, I'm great. I am the best friend you'll ever meet. But, in between, like, those interactions, like, good luck finding me. Good luck, like, pinning me down over text or phone calls, or like, I'm very hard to, I wouldn't say I'm flaky, but I'm non-committal.
Yeah. Well, that's the all or nothing part of you. You're either 100% in, or you just don't want to do it at all.
No, I don't even want to celebrate my birthday. So
yeah. So you're always reserved, until you're ready to be committed, and then you're there.
Yeah. So yeah, I just think I wanted to just talk about that a little bit. I wanted to give insight into why I started this. I wanted to give insight into, or I guess remind everybody that, it's okay to hear an episode about somebody who maybe has made choices or has a lifestyle that is vastly different from something you might agree with, because I probably will be the host of some of those episodes, and maybe I will, maybe I won't. I mean, I'm a pretty open-minded person. I have my own set of beliefs and values, but they surely do not get in the way of me loving and showing kindness. I pride myself on being able to look at each person, as a human being, and I don't see them as whatever their issue is, regardless of who they are, how they live their life. I see them as who they are, the person that they are, period, end of story. Their lifestyle or whatever it is that's not going to enhance, and it's not going to take away from my impression of them. And I think that that's more of that is necessary if we ever hope to, like, get rid of some of this division. And I think that we've forgotten that it's okay not to agree.
Well, the problem is that we've moved away from that ideal.
We all have to. It's like we all have to agree on.
It's like everybody has got to be. It's turned tribal. Everybody's in their own silo, and everybody has to have groupthink, and everybody has to act the same way and think the same way. And then if you're like outside of the norm, you're like cast out. You're canceled in whatever, whether you're on the left or the right or whatever. If you don't fit certain standards.
We're not just talking about politics, though.
No, you're right. No, but religion. You're either a perfect Christian or a perfect whatever. And then if you go outside of that, or if you add some component that's not in the Bible into your belief structure, then no, you're not a purist. Therefore, I must disassociate from you.
So I actually heard recently, I was listening to, I don't know if it was YouTube, or I think it was YouTube. I listen to podcasts like it's my job, because it basically is, because it's research for for what will hopefully be a paying career at some point. And I seek out these discussions because A, I get to learn about different points of view, even when I don't agree with them, and B, they're just freaking interesting. And I'm not going to say whose it was, but it was basically the topic was talking about why, and it's funny because once I watched this one, there was a bunch of other ones that I got fed in my algorithm. Why you must be a stay-at-home mom. Like how that's like the only way, and to do it any other way is just like terrible for your children. Now, or like it's just wrong. Like that's how we were meant to be. That's how it was intended. That's back when the world was a much healthier place to live. That's where we had more of that. Now it's obviously a financial aspect. Women are more ambitious and want to be their own person and all of that. The fact that, and I looked at the comment section, the fact that anybody's arguing over this, like, are you telling me, like, that is just nuts. Like, I don't even need to like dignify that with a huge answer. But that's, we're not just talking about politics and religion. We're talking about even things like that.
Lifestyle.
Yeah, lifestyle. Whether or not you choose to have children, whether or not you choose to get married. Like people, like we must have an opinion about everything these days. And I am just over here like, I don't know. Like, I don't know this person. Like who? Like, why do we care? Now, if you ask me my own personal belief for my own personal life, which is all I really feel like I'm qualified to answer, to be honest with you, I'm not an expert. Maybe if I was an expert, I'd have a stronger opinion. I feel like me being a stay-at-home mom was like the biggest gift and the biggest blessing. And I'm very happy it worked out that way, even though I would have never, ever chosen that path. But my illness chose it for me. And it just so happened that's how it worked out. And it was tremendously helpful and tremendously, it was very healthy for my children. And they would tell you the same thing. Now, do I think that is like the formula for every household? Like, I don't know. Like, that's the thing. I think that something that works for one person. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I don't like to be in a position to, cast judgment on somebody else for their lifestyles because, it's hard enough life is hard enough as it is.
I know. Circling back, it's just about sort of understanding that we can all have our own feelings, beliefs, values, but we should. But I would think about how you would want to be treated if somebody was trying to change your mind about yours, and ask yourself if that's what you're doing. If you're trying to be of influence in any way. And also, I think it's, for me, this whole gig is about challenging myself. And it's not, I'm going to be honest with you. And I'm not like really like, it's not that big of a challenge for me.
That's what I was going to say.
Go ahead. What were you
Yeah.
saying?
I was going to disagree with that choice of words there. It's not a challenge for yourself you are a natural at listening to people, understanding people, regardless of their background, because you are genuinely curious about who they are, what their story is, and what makes a person who tick, and how do they become who they are today. You're just genuinely curious about that. So that's, challenged about that is not the right word.
What do you think? Okay, well, I think maybe the challenge is, I always challenge myself. Like what I also do is I read a lot of times on social media what I do. And this is a practice of mine. I not seek out, but I'm open to looking at things that are definitely like maybe different than what I would agree with. And then I read or I look at stuff that I would agree with and I read the comments on the ones that disagree. And I try to see if I can understand where someone's coming from. 99.9% of the time, I'm going to walk away still feeling the same way. Mm-hmm. But it is, I encourage everyone to challenge yourself. Like, can you see the humanity in each person? Now, sometimes a hater is a hater is a hater. Mm-hmm. They're just hater. They are keyboard, what do you call them? Keyboard
warriors.
Keyboard warriors. And they're just out there spewing hate. They're trolls. And yes, those exist. But there are also people who will want to critique everything on the internet that they see and they, whatever. And so I just try to challenge myself to look at content or read things that, and see if I can test myself, basically. I test myself. And so, but part of it's because I am very curious. I always want to know, like, I wonder why they feel that way. I wonder where that comes from.
point of this podcast, and I think the reason why you are really good at it, is because you come from a place of curiosity and you give people the space that they need to be able to express themselves. And and all the listeners are able to learn something a little bit different. Take your first guest, James, right? He has a really challenged and unique background and then it formed him to who he is today. And so you might look at, him and just the way he appears, and you might have some kind of judgment about him. But dang, if you really got to know the guy, you'd be like, this guy's the nicest guy in the world.
Yeah.
And, you wouldn't have, initially appear to be that way. You could easily cast judgment on looking at people, or whether somebody is overweight, or somebody, whether it could be a health issue, not laziness, not gluttony, not any of that stuff. It could be a psychological issue that where they went through severe abuse in their life. And I think what this podcast allows for is the stories of those people to be shared, and it reinforces the idea of not judging a book by its cover.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And then it takes one step further beyond that to why to not judge a book by its cover. And then if you could find the commonalities, if you create that open space where you do find that one place of common ground where we could all agree on something, then you could find a place of mutual understanding.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this can give us.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So I hope we covered it all. Do you feel like there's anything else I missed?
I think you nailed it.
Okay. I do want to real quick just share that what I am experiencing in terms of like guests who are interested in coming on, I'm having a lot, and it's more just a heads up, I'm having a lot of requests to be on the podcast from people who have a similar story or the same story as one of my former guests. So a listener will hear an episode that they relate with, and they will contact me asking to tell their story on the same topic. And that happens every week. I get messages like that. And it's
Really?
like, oh yeah. So it's like we would be having the same conversation, similar conversation. It's like, and it's not as if it's just the timing, thing.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, babe, for joining me. And we will see you guys back here next week. Thanks so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this conversation, please give it a like and leave me a comment. I want to know what you guys think. Also, if you're looking for more information about how to be a guest on the show, please go to our website at humanityunlockedpodcast.com. We only record shows in person, and we are located in Sacramento, California. Oh, and if you're not subscribed, make sure you tap that button so you can get updated on weekly episodes as they go live. Is that it? I think that's it. See you guys next time.